Hello, I'm Angela Rout, a PhD student at the University of Calgary. I'm researching user-centered methods for architectural practice. In this video, I'm going to talk about how my work in community engagement has led me to studying user-centered design methods and introduce how they may be useful in architectural practice. Since graduating from my master's degree in architecture, I've been working in architecture and related community building work. Just last year, I was working as a consultant in a community engagement for an architectural project. I was helping a community identify their values so that they could present them to an architect in a way that makes sense for creating a new building. This type of work I was doing was helping the community articulate their needs to the architect. It was about building a relationship and a dialogue in a language that might make sense to both of them. This seemed to be successful. I got the sense that the community really needed a way to organize their ideas around architecture, and the process seemed to help make the design process run more smoothly. As this project concluded, I became very curious to find ways that I could do what I was already doing better. I also wanted to see if there were existing methods for engaging communities and see how they would work in architecture. As you may know, there is actually a fairly extensive community engagement requirement on all public buildings, and the public is becoming more aware of this. This has the potential to challenge the design process, as more voices, more stakeholders, and more input can mean more time, more money, and more stress. This is a problem if the community isn't clear on their own vision, or don't know how to articulate their needs in a way that gets them better buildings. The dichotomy is that community members are frustrated because they don't feel heard, contrasted with architects who get frustrated because they get irrelevant input, maybe such as color or preference of style. In my search for solutions, I started to look to other disciplines to see if I could find some methods that could be useful, which is where I came across user-centered design. User-centered design is a philosophy that centers design around users. In practice, they can be research methods, design exercises, cognitive studies, and participatory design methods that can be used at various stages in the design process. I am learning that user-centered design is an enormous discipline. It's growing fast, it is interdisciplinary, and it has a strong theoretical and methodological history that is rooted in cognitive psychology. I will look into these methods and see which ones might make sense for architecture, either from the perspective of a community or the designer developing a strong sense of empathy for the users. The aspect of user-centered design that makes them useful for architecture is the level of attention to non-biased data collection, analysis, and accuracy in reporting, which allows design concepts to be defendable, reliable, and evidence-based. The other thing that I champion is that these methods really need to be done by or alongside the designer, that having a third-party researcher takes away from the empathy-building aspect, as well as the opportunity for nuance and subtleties that only the primary researcher experiences. As this quote says, it is not merely a set of methods, but a philosophy. So to help you understand what I'm going on about, here are a few user-centered methods that may be useful for architecture. I had to pick only a few because there are really so many. These ones came from the IDEO method cards, but there are many, many more. Also, the categories are my own, which are meant to help explain the methods. So here are character profiles. So these are based on observations of real people. You develop character profiles to represent archetypes and details of their behavior or lifestyles. So here's an example of a character profile, and this could be held in the designer's office and referred to throughout the project. Empathy tools. So with these, you use tools like clouded glasses and weighted gloves to experience processes as though you yourself have the abilities of different users. So this helps the designer really understand what it's like to be the user. Long-range forecasts. So here you write up prose scenarios that describe how social and or technological trends might influence people's behavior and the use of a design. So this is a cognitive study where you imagine how things might change in the future. Conceptual landscape. In a conceptual landscape, you diagram, sketch, or map the aspects of abstract social and behavioral constructs or phenomena. Again, a conceptual study. On a card sort, on separate cards, name possible features, functions, or design attributes and ask people to organize the cards spatially in ways that make sense to them. And this can be a participatory design method where people who may not be architects can start to contribute to the design. Error analysis. This is listing all the things that can go wrong when using a design and determining the various possible causes. So this is something that could be done, again, as a participatory design method. Behavioral mapping. In this method, you track the positions and movements of people within a space over time. And this is done actually a lot in architecture already, but what is interesting is when the data is collected very carefully and methodically and also analyzed in such a way. Extreme user interviews, so identifying individuals who are extremely familiar or completely unfamiliar with the design and asking them to evaluate their experience using it. So having a method for testing the design throughout the process. So looking at these methods prompts many questions for me. Do these fit into architecture practice? Do they need to be adjusted to really help within the constraints of what architects do? And would they actually really help? I've started a little study of taking these methods and trying to plug them into the Canadian Handbook's Architectural Scope of Services chart. I wonder, okay, maybe some can fit in pre-design, which is where this type of stuff usually happens. But then, what if we use them in design development, where we could use it to resolve questions? What if they're included in post-occupancy studies, where architects can learn how their designs are actually used? Some of these studies may also be useful on their own, but what about learning how to analyze the results systematically? How to gather the information without bias, and then how best to represent the information in ways that can help the communities understand the problem and solution better. So this is my intro to user-centered design in architecture. Please let me know if you have any questions.